it's Patty and welcome to Food Prep 101. Today we're going to be dealing with cauliflower. So mine's a little wet because I already washed it off, took the plastic off it and washed it. If you have not bought cauliflower at the grocery store before, you want to make sure that it doesn't have any of those little black dots all over it. That can look like dirt, but it's actually the beginning of cauliflower starting to mold. So if you start to find any of the spots, you can always cut them off, but if you just avoid buying that one in the store, that's really how to tell if you've got a good cauliflower or not, and that's one of the only things to look for. So you want to remove, today what we're gonna do with it, there's 1,000 things you can do with cauliflower. You can just steam it, you can mash it, you can grate it into cauliflower rice. Today though, I'm gonna make pizza with it tonight. So what, this is Willa. So we're gonna cut it into cauliflower steaks, which might sound a little bit silly, but is amazing, okay? So the key is that you want to keep this, I don't know how bad the lighting is here, you want to keep this bottom part as intact as you can because that's what's going to hold the cauliflower together. So I just use a very small paring knife to cut off the little green parts, and I'm just going to set them aside. And all that you need, the only ingredients you need for this is a head of cauliflower, or 2 if you have a big family. So a small knife, a big knife, some garlic powder, and oregano, okay? And a little bit of olive oil. So last time, if you watched the first episode of this, I talked about having one of those olive oil misters and how I didn't have one, and so I just tossed the Brussels sprouts in the olive oil. But since then, I was like, why haven't I replaced that olive oil mister? So I went and I got one. And so that's what I'm gonna use today, but you don't need to. You can just brush the olive oil on if you want to with a little brush, a little kitchen brush. So I'm just cutting these little green leaves off as carefully as I can so I don't disrupt too much of this core, okay? If you miss a couple when you get it cut into the steaks, then you can always go back and trim off the ones that you didn't get. But if you're a little too aggressive here, then we'll find out when we cut the thing open. So you can't use the entire cauliflower head for this because these sides, when you cut down to make a flat cut, are gonna start to crumble away. So I have a little bowl here. I'm just gonna save the pieces of it that fall off, and I'm gonna turn those into cauliflower rice that I can stick in the freezer or in the refrigerator and use in place of rice. You can just throw them in the food processor. We'll cover that another day probably, but essentially you just take the flowers from the cauliflower, stick it in a food processor and pulse it until you get little grain-like pieces of it. Okay, so I'm gonna cut the edge so that I start with a flat section, okay? So bigger knife comes in handy here. So you could try and cook that, but see how easily it falls apart. So this is the part I'm gonna set aside and say, for another day, my friend. Okay, so I'm gonna do that to both sides here. And I may end up with some more crumbles as we go, and I'll just add those to this bowl. And like I said, save it for another day, okay? So out of one of these, you should be able to get about 3-inch thick steaks. So it sort of depends on how big your center core is, how many you can get. And this is the kind of scary part, but it's not really scary. You just have to be confident with a knife, okay? So don't let the knife be in charge of you. You have to be in charge of the knife. So you're gonna grab it nice and tight with a nice strong hand, support this one, push the cauliflower down with your hand firmly on the side, nice and flat, so your fingers aren't in the way, and just decide where you're gonna make that cut and commit to it. And be stronger than the cauliflower. Okay, so I have one nice little cauliflower steak. This one was a little piece down here, so that one's gonna be a little bit smaller. And then this one came out kind of nice. So you have to be really careful with them or they'll fall apart. And I only lost a couple little edges here for my bowl. So now I have a sheet pan lined with foil, because I love to line it with foil because it makes cleanup amazingly easy, but you don't have to do that. You can totally do this flat on your pan. Okay, but I'm going to take my, no comment here, right? My handy dandy mister, and I'm just going to lightly spray both sides. Don't do that, don't break it. Gotta be very careful with your cauliflower. I'll stick that back together. It'll get held together with sauce. Okay, so I'm gonna put these on here. Gotta fix this one. You were just right in there, right? Yeah, you're still connected. Nobody saw that, right? Just me. Okay, and then I just use a little bit of garlic powder and oregano. You don't need to use either. These also, but it makes it taste a little more pizza crusty for what I'm doing with it tonight, which is I'm going to bake it. So I'm gonna roast it first by itself, and then when it's all delicious and stuff, I'm going to put a little bit of pizza sauce and some mozzarella on it, and I don't even know how that one fits in there. And some peppers, and make little cauliflower pizzas for myself. So really no carb pizza. So that's an idea, but you can also use these as regular steaks. They taste amazing if you brush them with balsamic vinegar, so that's an idea too. Once you get used to the method of roasting them and what the texture tastes like, you can experiment with all of your own favorite flavors. So this is just one idea of something that you can do with cauliflower, but it's really a very easy and amazing base of flavor and food. Okay, so right now I have my 3 steaks of cauliflower on the pan, and I'm gonna preheat my oven to 425. I'm gonna bake this for between 10 to 15 minutes. It should be a little pretty and golden, okay? And then we're gonna flip it over and cook it for another 10 minutes. Then, when it has all its toppings on, you're gonna slide it back in the oven with the broiler on for about 5 minutes, just to make that cheese nice and bubbly.